Woody Allen was 57 years old when he walked into Mia Farrow's apartment and destroyed everything. The woman he'd loved for 12 years. The family they built together. His reputation. His legacy. All for someone who called him Uncle Woody. But before we dive into this story, if you enjoy untold moments from cinema history, hit that subscribe button and stay with us. It was January 19th, 1992, 3:15 in the afternoon on a cold Manhattan Sunday. Mia Farrow was alone in her darkroom on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, in her sprawling Dakota building apartment. The same building where John Lennon had lived and died. The same building where Rosemary's Baby was filmed. History seemed to seep through the walls of this place. Mia was developing photographs from Dylan's 7th birthday party the week before. The familiar chemical smell of developer and fixer filled the small, cramped space as images slowly materialized in the solution baths. Family moments captured forever. Laughter around a dinosaur-themed birthday cake. Children playing in Central Park. Normal life. The kind of moments that seem precious only after they have been destroyed forever. She'd been living with Woody for 12 years, but they'd never married, never shared the same apartment. Woody lived across Central Park in his own penthouse, visiting regularly but maintaining his independence. It was an arrangement that worked for both of them. Or so Mia thought until that afternoon when her world collapsed. Then she found them. Pictures of her 21-year-old adopted daughter, Suni Previn. Naked, intimate, graphics hidden among the innocent family snapshots. Taken by the man Mia had shared a bed with for over a decade. The man who'd helped raise Suni since she was 10 years old. The man who'd played uncle, mentor, father figure to all her children for 12 years. The first photo fell from Mia's trembling hands onto the darkroom floor like a bomb exploding in slow motion. Then another, more intimate than the last. Graphic, sexual, professional quality. Undeniable evidence of betrayal so profound it defied comprehension. The room went completely silent except for the low hum of the red light above her head and the sound of her world crashing down around her. Mia Farrow had discovered that Woody Allen was having an affair with her daughter. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just betrayal. This was the moment that would split one of Hollywood's most celebrated partnerships and create a scandal that would follow Woody Allen for the rest of his career. A scandal that would divide audiences between those who could separate the art from the artist and those who never could again. But here's what makes this story impossibly complicated. What makes it impossible to understand with simple moral categories. Because while Woody Allen was making the most destructive personal choice of his life, he was simultaneously creating some of the most brilliant and innovative films of his entire career. The affair had been going on for months, maybe longer. Suni was a freshman at Drew University in New Jersey studying psychology. 21 years old, trying to figure out who she was beyond being Mia Farrow's adopted daughter. Woody was directing Husbands and Wives, a film about marriage falling apart, about infidelity, about the lies we tell ourselves about love and commitment. He was writing dialogue about betrayal while living it every single day. The irony was almost too perfect, too cinematically neat, too Woody Allen. Life imitating art imitating life until you couldn't tell where the neurotic fiction ended and the messy reality began. The man who'd built a career examining moral ambiguity was now living inside his own moral disaster. Suni, he wasn't biologically related to Woody. He'd never legally adopted her. He'd never lived in the same house with her full-time. These would become his primary defenses later. The technical arguments, the legal distinctions, the carefully parsed explanations. But they missed the emotional reality completely. The family dynamic, the power imbalance, the simple, undeniable fact that this was Mia's daughter. Mia had adopted Suni from Korea in 1977 when Suni was 7 years old. Born in Seoul, abandoned as a child, she'd lived on the streets eating garbage before being placed in an orphanage. Mia brought her to America, gave her a family, a future, opportunities most orphans could never imagine. Woody had been part of that family structure for most of Suni's adolescent and adult life. The photos Mia found weren't recent snapshots. They were dated, some from months before. Woody had been carrying on this relationship while sitting at family dinners with all the children, while celebrating birthdays and holidays, while playing the role of loving partner and surrogate father figure. The compartmentalization was stunning. Even for someone who'd made a career out of examining moral complexity and human self-deception. When Mia confronted Woody that January afternoon in her apartment, his response was characteristically intellectual and completely tone-deaf. He didn't deny what was happening. He didn't apologize or show remorse. Instead, he tried to explain the situation, to rationalize it, to make it sound like something other than what it obviously was. The heart wants what it wants, he would say later in interviews, as if desire automatically justified devastation, as if passion naturally excused betrayal, as if the man who'd spent 3 decades analyzing human relationships in his films somehow couldn't see the obvious wrongness and destructiveness of this particular one. But Woody Allen had always been fascinated by inappropriate relationships. His films were absolutely full of them. Manhattan featured a 42-year-old man dating a 17-year-old high school student. The character was clearly based on Allen himself. In real life, Allen had consistently dated actresses decades younger throughout his entire career. Diane Keaton was much younger. Mia Farrow was 17 years younger. The pattern was clearly there. The warning signs. Critics had pointed them out for years, calling his movies problematic, his casting choices questionable, his obsessions with young women disturbing. Now the pattern had become intensely personal and devastatingly public. The scandal broke nationally in August 1992. People magazine ran the story first. Then every other major publication followed. Entertainment Weekly, Time, Newsweek. The story had everything tabloids and legitimate media loved. Fame, sex, family drama, betrayal, power dynamics. The photos themselves were sealed by court order, but the damage was already done. Everyone knew. Everyone had an immediate opinion. Hollywood split into distinct camps almost instantly. Some defended Woody as a brilliant artist whose personal choices should remain separate from his creative output. Others condemned him entirely, calling for boycotts of his films. Many simply stayed silent, unsure how to process the contradiction between the films they genuinely admired and the man who had created them. But here's what the endless scandal coverage often missed completely. While Woody Allen's personal life was imploding spectacularly, his artistic output was actually reaching extraordinary new heights. Husbands and Wives, released just as the scandal was peaking, was absolutely brilliant. Raw, emotionally honest in ways that felt almost confessional. The film examined marriage, betrayal, and moral failure with surgical precision and uncomfortable insight. Critics called it his best work in years. Audiences called him a monster. Both things were simultaneously true. The film featured innovative handheld cameras, improvisational dialogue, documentary-style intimacy that felt revolutionary. It was genuinely innovative filmmaking, technically masterful. It influenced an entire generation of independent filmmakers who would later cite this controversial period as Allen's most creatively fertile and important. Directors like Noah Baumbach, Greta Gerwig, and Richard Linklater would build entire careers on the neurotic relationship analysis that Allen perfected during these scandalous years. Then came the brutal custody battle that would drag on for months and consume headlines across the country. Mia sued for sole custody of their biological son Ronan and adopted children Dylan and Moses. Woody countersued, demanding joint custody and visitation rights. The legal proceedings became intensely public, ugly, devastating. Details emerged daily that made everything exponentially worse for everyone involved. The custody hearings began in March 1993 at Manhattan Family Court. Every day brought new revelations, new accusations, new humiliations. The private details of their 12-year relationship were dissected in open court. Love letters were read aloud. Personal conversations were analyzed by lawyers. Their sex life was discussed in clinical detail. Mia's legal team painted Woody as a manipulative narcissist who couldn't be trusted around children. They brought up his films, his obsession with young women, his inappropriate jokes and comments. They argued that his relationship with Suni proved he was capable of grooming and manipulating vulnerable young people. Woody's lawyers countered that Mia was a vindictive woman who was using the children as weapons. They portrayed her as emotionally unstable, prone to dramatic outbursts, and willing to coach her children to lie about their father. They suggested that Dylan's allegations were the product of Mia's manipulation, not actual abuse. The testimony was devastating. Friends were forced to choose sides. Household staff were subpoenaed. The children's therapists testified. Every intimate detail of their relationship became public record. The media coverage was relentless and salacious. During the custody investigation, 7-year-old Dylan Farrow accused Woody Allen of sexual abuse. The allegation emerged during interviews with court-appointed psychologists who were evaluating the family dynamics. Dylan described specific incidents that allegedly occurred at Mia's Connecticut country home. The allegation was immediately and thoroughly investigated by multiple agencies. Connecticut State Police opened a criminal investigation. The Child Sexual Abuse Clinic at Yale New Haven Hospital conducted extensive interviews with Dylan over several months. New York Social Services launched their own inquiry. Multiple professionals examined Dylan using state-of-the-art techniques for interviewing child witnesses. The investigations were exhaustive. Polygraph tests were administered. Psychological profiles were created. Physical evidence was examined. Dylan was interviewed by specialists trained in detecting false memories and coach testimony. Every possible angle was explored by professionals who understood how complex these cases could be. After months of investigation, no criminal charges were ever filed. The Connecticut prosecutor's office announced they found no credible evidence of abuse. The Yale New Haven Clinic concluded that Dylan's statements appeared to be coached and unreliable. Multiple experts raised concerns about possible contamination of Dylan's memory through repeated questioning and suggestion. But the damage to Allen's reputation was catastrophic and permanent. Even without criminal charges, even with expert testimony questioning the allegations, the mere existence of the accusation changed how people viewed him forever. Woody lost the custody case completely. The judge called his relationship with Suni grossly inappropriate and a demonstration of poor judgment. But the sexual abuse allegations couldn't be legally proven. The truth, as always with Allen, remained frustratingly complicated, contested, unclear, impossible to resolve definitively. Suni defended their relationship publicly and aggressively. She gave detailed interviews calling Woody kind, gentle, intellectually stimulating, and genuinely loving. She described Mia as controlling, manipulative, and vindictive. She painted herself as an intelligent adult making her own romantic choices, not a victim of grooming or manipulation. Her perspective complicated the narrative considerably, but public opinion had shifted dramatically and permanently. The man who'd made neurosis charming and intellectual anxiety appealing had become genuinely disturbing to many viewers. His films, once celebrated for their intelligence and sophisticated wit, now felt uncomfortable and suspicious. The age gaps in his movies seemed less quirky and more predatory. The intellectual justifications felt hollow and self-serving. Woody and Suni married quietly in 1997 in Venice, Italy. They adopted 2 daughters together, Bashay and Manzi. By all reliable accounts, they built a stable, loving, functional family. Friends consistently described Woody as a devoted father and attentive husband. The marriage endured, thrived even. Whatever the origins, it became genuine. But the creative and professional cost was absolutely enormous. Woody Allen went from being universally celebrated to permanently divisive virtually overnight. Major stars stopped working with him. Studios became increasingly reluctant to finance his films. His American audience eroded steadily, though European appreciation remained surprisingly strong throughout the controversy. The irony is that this controversial period actually produced some of his most interesting and morally complex work. Films that grappled directly with moral ambiguity, guilt, and the possibility of redemption. Crimes and misdemeanors explored whether moral people could commit immoral acts. Matchpoint examined luck versus justice. Blue Jasmine dissected self-delusion and denial. Movies that seemed to examine his own moral failures through carefully constructed fiction. Cate Blanchett won an Oscar for Blue Jasmine in 2014. Her acceptance speech explicitly thanked Woody for his brilliant writing and masterful direction. But by then, the Me Too movement was emerging powerfully. The Dylan Farrow allegations resurfaced with renewed intensity. Hollywood's tolerance for moral complexity and artistic separation was diminishing rapidly. Amazon canceled a multi-million-dollar production deal with Allen in 2018 after the allegations resurfaced during the Me Too movement. The deal, originally worth over $60 million, would have allowed Allen to make multiple films exclusively for Amazon's streaming platform. But as public opinion shifted against figures accused of sexual misconduct, Amazon executives decided the association was too risky. Publishers dropped his autobiography in 2020 after massive backlash from employees and authors. Hachette Book Group had planned to release Allen's memoir, but staff members staged protests and several high-profile authors threatened to leave the publisher. The book was ultimately published by a smaller press but received minimal promotion. Major actors publicly regretted working with him. Greta Gerwig, who had starred Into Rome with Love, said she would not work with Allen again. Colin Firth expressed regret about appearing in Magic in the Moonlight. Ellen Page, who starred Into Rome with Love, wrote a lengthy Facebook post criticizing herself for working with Allen and encouraging other actors to speak out. Timothée Chalamet donated his salary from a rainy day in New York to charity and distanced himself from the film. Rebecca Hall made similar statements about Vicky Cristina Barcelona. These public statements from major stars created a ripple effect throughout Hollywood, making it increasingly difficult for Allen to cast A-list talent. The man who had once been completely untouchable in Hollywood became genuinely toxic in mainstream American culture. Film festivals began declining to screen his new work. Distributors became reluctant to acquire his films. Critics who had once celebrated his every release now felt obligated to include disclaimers about his personal life in their reviews. But the international response remained notably different. European critics and audiences continued to celebrate Allen's work, viewing the American backlash as puritanical overreach. His films still opened at prestigious festivals like Cannes and Venice. European actors remained willing to work with him when American stars refused. This cultural divide highlighted the different ways societies process allegations of misconduct and questions about separating art from artists. European intellectuals argued that Allen's artistic contributions shouldn't be erased because of unproven allegations. American critics increasingly argued that supporting Allen's work meant complicity in a culture that protects powerful men from consequences. The debate became a defining cultural battleground of the Me Too era. Allen became a test case for how society should handle accusations against beloved artists when criminal charges aren't filed, but public opinion has shifted decisively. There were no clear answers, only competing values and perspectives. But his influence on cinema remained completely undeniable and historically significant. The conversational dialogue style he perfected during this period became the standard template for independent film. Directors studied his techniques frame by frame. Film schools taught courses dedicated to analyzing his innovations. The neurotic romantic comedy genre he essentially created from scratch dominated the 1990s and 2000s. Before Annie Hall, romantic comedies were largely formulaic studio productions. Allen showed that relationships could be examined with psychological depth, intellectual honesty, and genuine complexity. His influence shaped an entire generation of filmmakers. Wes Anderson built his entire aesthetic around Allen's obsession with symmetry and neurotic character studies. Noah Baumbach made a career out of Allen-style relationship dissection, creating films like The Squid and The Whale and Marriage Story that examined divorce and family dysfunction with Allen's signature blend of humor and pain. Greta Gerwig's directorial style, particularly in Frances Ha and Lady Bird, borrowed heavily from Allen's techniques for creating intimate, character-driven narratives. Richard Linklater's Before trilogy used Allen's conversational dialogue approach to create some of the most acclaimed romantic films of the modern era. Even directors who never acknowledged Allen's influence showed clear technical debt to his innovations. The handheld camera work in Husbands and Wives influenced the Dogme 95 movement in Denmark. His use of jazz music as emotional counterpoint inspired countless filmmakers to reconsider how music could function in cinema. His technical achievements during the Scandal years were particularly revolutionary. He was among the first major directors to use digital editing technology, allowing for more experimental narrative structures. His cinematographers, particularly Sven Nykvist and Carlo Di Palma, developed new techniques for natural lighting that made films look more realistic and intimate. The improvisation techniques Allen developed with his actors became standard practice in independent cinema. He would encourage actors to find a natural rhythm of conversation, to overlap dialogue, to discover moments of genuine spontaneity. This approach influenced everyone from Judd Apatow to the Coen brothers. Allen's productivity during this controversial period was also unprecedented. While most filmmakers struggle to make one film every few years, Allen maintained his schedule of one film annually, each one technically accomplished and thematically sophisticated. This work ethic inspired an entire generation of independent filmmakers to think of cinema as a craft that required constant practice and refinement. His writing innovations were equally significant. Allen popularized the neurotic protagonist who was simultaneously sympathetic and unlikable. This character type became central to modern comedy and drama. Characters who were intelligent but self-destructive, successful but miserable, charming but deeply flawed. The Allen aesthetic, urban intellectualism, jazz soundtracks, handheld cameras, overlapping dialogue, morally complex characters, became a recognizable cinematic language that influenced thousands of filmmakers worldwide. Even directors who disagreed with his personal choices continued to study and adapt his techniques. Today, Woody Allen lives primarily in Europe, still making films annually, still controversial, still brilliant, still deeply problematic. The Suni relationship endures, nearly 30 years later. Their daughters are now grown adults. The family appears stable, private, and genuinely happy. But the fundamental questions remain completely unresolved. About power dynamics, about appropriateness, about whether artistic genius excuses questionable behavior, about whether art can be meaningfully separated from the artist who creates it, about whether redemption is possible when the original wound refuses to heal. The photos Mia found in her darkroom that January afternoon changed everything permanently and irreversibly. Not just for three people caught in a messy love triangle, but for how American culture thinks about artists and accountability, about the price of genius and the cost of fame, about the complexity of love and damage and forgiveness in a world that increasingly demands simple moral clarity from its public figures. The story became a case study in how scandals can simultaneously destroy and preserve legacies. Allen's American reputation was devastated, but his international standing remained largely intact. His films were removed from some platforms, but celebrated on others. His techniques influenced young filmmakers who publicly distanced themselves from his persona. The paradox perfectly captured the contradictions of separating art from artist in an interconnected media landscape. Allen's innovations in dialogue, cinematography, and narrative structure became standard techniques taught in film schools worldwide. But his name became toxic in many professional circles. Students learned his methods while professors avoided mentioning his personal life. The cultural impact of the Suni scandal extends far beyond Allen's personal reputation. It became one of the first major tests of how society should handle allegations and controversies involving beloved artists. The case established patterns that would later be applied to figures like Roman Polanski, Bill Cosby, Kevin Spacey, and Harvey Weinstein during the Me Too movement. The scandal also highlighted the complex relationship between European and American attitudes toward artistic achievement and personal morality. European intellectuals consistently argued that Allen's contributions to cinema shouldn't be erased because of personal controversies. American critics increasingly demanded moral accountability from artists as a precondition for cultural celebration. This transatlantic divide became a defining feature of Allen's later career. While American museums and retrospectives avoided his work, European institutions continued to honor his achievements. The Venice Film Festival gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2021, while American film schools stopped teaching his techniques in many programs. The children involved in the scandal grew up to have completely different perspectives on what happened. Suni consistently defended her relationship with Woody, describing their marriage as loving and stable. Dylan Farrow maintained her allegations and became a prominent voice in the Me Too movement. Moses Farrow defended Allen and accused Mia of manipulation. Ronan Farrow became an investigative journalist who helped expose Harvey Weinstein, partly motivated by his own family's experiences with unaccountable powerful men. These divergent perspectives from the people most directly affected highlighted the impossibility of reaching simple conclusions about complex family dynamics and trauma. Even the participants couldn't agree on a single narrative about what happened and what it meant for their lives and careers. Woody Allen broke his family to follow his heart. He found lasting happiness with Suni. He created masterful films about moral failure and human complexity. He lost his American audience almost entirely. He kept making innovative art. He remained permanently controversial. He stayed married. He never publicly apologized for anything. The story doesn't have a clean ending because real life refuses simple resolutions. It never does with artists like him. Love and damage, genius and failure, all existing together in the uncomfortable space where life gets complicated and art gets made and moral questions resist easy answers. If this story gave you a new perspective, there's more coming. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next Untold moment.